Welcome to the Real Money Coach Show. We're live right now, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We are glad that you are here. And you know what we do. Come on in. Tell us where you're watching from. What part of the country are you watching from? Are you in the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina? Or are you in one of these other wonderful states? Tell me where you are watching from. Put it in the chat so that we can say hello to you this evening and let you know that we are glad that you are tuning in for this very, very important broadcast today, right? What's making it so important today is we have a phenomenal guest that's going to be on the show. Tchass, Ari, he is the president and CEO of Communities in School. And when I saw what they were doing, I was simply amazed at it. Listen, we got Charleston Carter all the way from Alexandria, Virginia. Good to be here. Been in Alexandria a couple times, got relatives there. Harvey Jones, thank you for joining us from Birmingham, Alabama. Let's see. We got D. Williams for Columbia, South Carolina. Listen, we got right now, we got 3 different states represented, and I haven't even heard from nobody in North Carolina yet. Where you at, North Carolina? Where my Queen City folks at? Where you at? Come on in, D. It is good to have you here. D is one of those really strong South Carolina women's basketball team. They had a close one the other night, D, but I saw they won. I heard that they pulled it out in overtime. Ruth Bell is in the house from Charlotte, North Carolina. Thank you for your wonderful text message. I pray that your recovery is going well and all that good stuff. Listen, so we're going to bring on my co-host that y'all love so much. I know y'all love Michelle. That's a good thing because she love y'all too. The Real Money Coach family. Kimberly McGuinn, thank you for being here from Charlotte, North Carolina. I get to see Kimberly multiple times a week, right? Sunday school, and then our meetings and that and so forth. Dion K from North Carolina is in the house watching us on LinkedIn as well. So let's bring the host with the most, the co-host, the girl herself, Michelle Mitchell, on stage with me. Michelle, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Tony?
I'm doing well, Michelle. I'm doing well. I had a little bout the last couple of days, but I'm doing good, feeling well.
I'm glad you're feeling better.
Energized, ready for the show today. We missed you last week.
Yes.
Tell us about your Valentine's Day. What did you
It
have?
was Valentine's Day.
Yeah, you had a good time.
Yeah. Had a good time.
What Lisa and I did.
I got 2 dates because,
You got 2 dates.
date night on Wednesday. So Valentine was on Tuesday.
Oh, so you guys do date night on Wednesday?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Got it. So we do ours on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
As you well know, as those who've been following the show know that me and Lisa do date night every Friday night. And so what we did for Valentine's, though, is we went in the middle of the day. So we did the middle of the day. We went lunch, and it was no crowd. There was no. I mean, we just pulled up to the restaurant. There was plenty of parks, and we got in, had a great meal. So we had a great Valentine's.
Nice.
Yeah. So, I talked a little bit about this on my show, the radio show and stuff, and just the last week with the shooting up at Michigan State.
Yeah.
So what's the feel? What's going on in Michigan? Can you kind of feel a little bit of that?
I think Michigan is some changes happened in the last election where now the state of Michigan is shifted parties. So it's not a split party anymore. It's the Democratic Party from the governor all the way down to the House and the Senate.
So full control.
The attorney general and secretary of state. Hasn't happened in 40 years.
Wow.
So between the Oxford high school shooting about a year and a half ago and Michigan State, and it was so sad to see on the news that there were kids waiting out, during the event that had on the Oxford Strong shirts.
Right.
And they came from that high school. and now
Yeah,
we're in
that was
another
the
gun
thing.
violence shoot.
So can you imagine that you're 18, 19, 20
Mhm.
year old and you have been involved in two mass shooting
Shootings.
events? I
Yeah.
mean, wow. I mean, I hope they're getting, counseling and
Yeah.
therapy and
It,
all
it,
that type
it
of stuff.
sounds like there's a lot of counseling support for the students on campus. Classes started back yesterday, and there's mixed emotions about it, you know.
Sure.
But I think the Michigan government sounds as though they might do something to help with um, gun violence,
Gun control.
which
Yeah.
is needed. Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it sounds like, the parties are coming together. At least they're talking about it so that because this happened to two groups of kids in a year and a half in the state.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it's
that's a
difficult.
lot. And
Hmm.
I know that I saw some petitions where they wanted, some of the students were petitioning for to, take the rest of the school year and make it virtual,
Hmm.
because of this. I don't know if they'll get anywhere with that, but
Yeah, I'm not
one of
sure.
the things that I did see that I thought was a great moment, is, of course, the big rivalry between Michigan and Michigan
Yes.
State,
Mhm.
and how, when Michigan State, I think it was their first game back,
Yep. Yep.
played
At
at
Michigan.
Michigan,
Yeah.
and how that community kind of surrounded.
Yeah.
Let's put aside our rivalry.
Hmm.
It was a great game,
Yeah.
but let's put that aside and just kind of show, some solidarity. So
Yeah.
love it. Thomas Bird from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Thank you. Bird is the word, is what we say about Thomas Bird. Thank you for being here. So yeah, lot going on.
Yes.
And I know Thomas Bird is one of those people very passionate about, gun violence and stuff, as we've been
Mhm.
talking on one of the other platforms that we're together. So yeah, so lot happening on the
Yeah.
financial side of things. Of course, we are, coming to the end of February pretty soon,
Yeah.
and that means that we will, it's getting close to that April 17th, the deadline for
That
taxes,
is
and
correct.
people are, doing what they have to do there. So
Hmm.
that's always, a big topic. um let's see what Harvey put here. So unfortunately, 18 to 20 is the average age of our country's warriors that serve in combat defense of our nation. The children and families should be eligible for government sponsored PTS counseling. Very, very good. Yeah. So, and of course, Harvey Jones is a military guy, spent a career in, the Marines, and so have a lot of respect for, our, armed services. I mean, you feel, they put their life on the line,
Yeah.
for the country.
Hmm.
And I think about my dad, especially, we're talking February being Black History Month. I remember my dad talking about, just going in Europe and what that was like, um, you know, fighting in Europe, and then come back and be treated so badly in the
Right.
US. And
Hmm.
so lots happening in the world for sure. So
Yes, for sure.
yeah. So
For sure.
listen. So Michelle, this is the deal. So our guest tonight, is the president and CEO of Communities in School, and this is a national organization. And I
Mhm.
didn't even know anything about it. I heard about it before, and then, kind of got to know him a little bit because, Marlon Smith and some others were speaking. He was one of the panelists. I did my little dog and pony show as part of that, and really just got a chance to take a closer look at communities in school.
Mhm.
And as we're talking about the school violence and all these things, I think what they do, is awfully important. So I think we'll have a really great conversation tonight with him. And then, of course, matter of fact, your ears should have been burning today.
Really?
Yeah, they should have been burning today. I was on a Zoom with a couple other guys that were at that particular event, and I was just talking. Well, no, actually, I was on a podcast today. The podcast was "The History of Being Black." It was the name of
Oh,
that. Was the name of that podcast.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I just brought up that each and every one of us should look to take our passion and turn it into a profit. And I
Yes.
gave you all the credit. I said, yeah, my good friend Michelle Mitchell, Mitchell Consulting, this is her tagline, turning your
Yes.
passion into profit, because we
Yes.
were talking about how do we close this wealth gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the major ways, I think there's a couple of things, is through education. And
Yes.
I think it's through what I would say the double E's, right?
Yeah.
Education and entrepreneurship.
Yep.
I think those are the two things that we can do to close this wealth gap.
Close the
And
gap
we all need that
quickly. Yeah.
quickly,
Yes.
um,
Quickly.
because we don't have the 2053, right?
No.
And that's what
Mm-mm.
the Institute of Policy Studies say, that by that year the median income of Black families is going to be zero. That's
Yeah.
3 decades. And
Mm-hmm.
here's the thing, Michelle. I was thinking about, we graduated 3 decades ago.
Yeah.
That's not that long.
No, it's
That's
not.
not that long.
Mm-mm.
So in our lifetime, if we don't do something different, we could still be living when they project our median income in a Black family to be zero.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, not on my watch, right? Not on
Exactly.
our watch.
Not
Each
on
of
our
us need
watch.
to do our part to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that doesn't happen. To make
Yes.
sure that doesn't happen. Um, so yeah, so I'm looking forward to this conversation. Let me formally say, let me tell the folks about Tchass. And he is he is the president and CEO of Community and Schools here in Charlotte Mecklenburg School System. CIS is a support organization that empowers students to stay in school, achieve life. Tchass has extensive leadership experience in social services. He's a graduate of Morehouse, right? So
Mhm.
Morehouse man in the house. You know what President Obama said about Morehouse, right? I don't think it applies to Tchass, but you know what he said? He said, you can always tell a Morehouse man, but you can't tell him much, right? But wonderful institution, Morehouse. He's got an executive master's degree in public administration from Maxwell School of Government at Syracuse University, the great Syracuse University.
Okay.
And so, without any further ado, let's bring Tchass on the stage with us.
Welcome.
There he is.
Thank
How you
you.
doing?
Thank you. I'm doing well. Thank you all for having me. It's great to see you.
Absolutely, man. We're glad that you are here. Let's see. Jeff Smith. I don't know if that, he says, of the DC Voice. This is one of the comments. Drafted legislation that DC Council passed to pilot community schools in DC over a decade ago. So
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jeff. I actually had an opportunity to meet the CEO when I was at a national conference in DC earlier this year. So thank you for helping us expand our footprint even into Washington, DC.
So, man, I want to really unpack community and schools. I've seen some video footage of kids here in Charlotte that you actually took to DC. And I want to tell you something. What I really liked about the video and the trip was, because oftentimes when we take our kids on a trip, we look for the least expensive hotel, the least expensive venue to put them in. But you guys took them first class all the way to expose them to something different. And I think that's one of the things that's missing for our kids, is they don't get exposed to different things, greater life, or whatever however you want to frame it. But I thought that was one of the things that was really cool. So so just tell us a little bit about yourself, and then a little bit about community and schools.
Yeah, so once again, thank you for the opportunity, Tony and Michelle. As you stated, I'm the president and CEO of Communities and Schools. I started this role right in the middle of the pandemic, October 2020. And so starting during the pandemic, I was really able to see a lot more, from a bird's eye view, the disparities within our community. Communities in Schools, as you stated, is a national organization. So sometimes I have to pinch myself thinking that I'm a part of a national movement. Across the country, we provide services to over 1 million students. And what we do is we really provide wraparound supports. If you think about how the schools are set up, our founders said that they missed a key ingredient. So you have administrators. Those are the folks who make sure that the buses run, that food's in the cafeteria, and that the teachers get paid. Then you have the teachers who are there primarily to make sure that students learn. What we do at Communities in Schools is we put a caring adult in the school. We're in 56 schools here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg. And what we do is we're there as a mentor, as a support, as a confidant, as a shoulder that the student can cry on if needed. But we really provide them encouragement and support and help them navigate the challenging times in our life, as many of us know as being a teenager, but not just in teens. We are in K through 12. Here in Charlotte, last year, we served nearly 6,000 students, and we provide all of the support that they need so that they can focus on their learning. We want to remove the barriers because we believe teachers have a hard enough job as it is. So we remove the barriers to learning for the students.
Well, I think that's pretty awesome. And just being in the house with an educator, and my daughter's an educator, understanding that there are a lot of barriers when the kids come in. And, one of the things that I want to unpack is, we talked a little bit about this on the radio show. And I talked about, okay, Charlotte is the tale of two cities, right? So for people like me who came in from somewhere else, people who like Michelle who eventually come here, people who come from another place, we see it as a land of prosperity. Mm-hmm. But as we know, the upper mobility study that was done, I think it was released something like 2014, 16, somewhere up in there, said that if you were born in poverty in Charlotte, we were 50 out of 50 that you would get out of poverty. And as we were talking about that, and I said it's the tale of two cities, you say it's a tale of two school districts. Would you mind expounding on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, and I also touch on that trip to DC because it really dovetails nicely to your question. So Charlotte is a beautiful city. When people come to visit, they talk about how clean it is. We've got all of these sports amenities in our downtown. The skyline is just immaculate. But to imagine that we have students who go to high poverty schools, right? Charlotte Mecklenburg schools did a study themselves. And what they realized is that if a child is exposed to poverty for extended periods of time, that's sort of going to be what they're focused on. So imagine we have students in our community who grow up in poverty to no fault of their own. They then go to a high poverty school. That really just makes the forecast from that study come true, because that's all that many of these children see all day long. And in fact, we call them our kids. They're our kids, right? So our goal is to make sure that we provide opportunities and exposure so that they can really unmask what their potential is in life. So the trip you talked about, we take 20 students from Charlotte, we take 20 community members, and we go to Washington, D.C. For many of those students, that's their first time getting on an airplane. We put them in a 5-star hotel, thanks in large part to the support of the Gambrell Foundation. And our goal is to just expand their minds. We are in a hotel when the hotel has a historian, and they talk about that in this lobby right here, Dr. King was actually modifying his speech for the March on Washington. So to have students walk in that same area, to have students tour the monuments, to have them start facilitating dialogue, walking arm in arm with policymakers, bankers, and leaders from this community, their window to the world has gotten a lot bigger. And that is what is needed. You talked about the wealth gap. One of the biggest things, people think that wealth is a luxury, wealth is a nice to have. But in this days and time, wealth is a must-have because wealth
Mm.
gives you opportunities. And if you don't have access to opportunities, then you really don't get a chance to live your full potential out.
Well, I think opportunities and options, right? So I love that wealth is not a luxury, it's almost a necessity in order to survive today. And so that's really and
It
and
is.
the
It is. I mean, so think about it, right? The people who have access to more wealth, if things don't work out in their school, they can go to a different school. If they have an illness, they can get the best treatment. If they need to change their neighborhoods, they'll change their neighborhoods. And so if policies are not written well and they're going against you, wealth opens that door. It's they say it's a great equalizer in terms of your profession. If you are a millionaire and you make your millions by collecting bottles, it doesn't matter how you got it. It is a great equalizer in the
right,
community. And what happens is wealth even gives you access to manipulating the political system. So many people in our community feel that our only tool is to march or to vote. But if we had enough wealth and we started inviting policymakers into our communities and saying, hey, we'll vote for you only if you pass this particular policy, it just opens up so many doors. And so when you talked about in 30 years, if we don't change what we're doing, that half of African Americans, their wealth will be zero. I mean,
right.
that not on my
That's the
watch
median.
either,
That's the
Tony and
middle.
Michelle.
Right. That's the middle, right?
And that's adding all of the billionaires in. We like to pat ourselves on the back because we got the Beyoncés and the Rihannas and the Jay-Z's. But you add all of those billionaires into the equation, and still half of African American people in this country, their wealth will be zero. If you look at the Forbes 100 list, you done got me started. This is my
Okay, come on with it.
you look at the Forbes 400 list. The top 100 people on that list have more wealth than every single African American in this country combined.
Wow.
Wow.
Wow. That's serious.
Mhm.
That's serious. And like you said, we have these individual wins, right? You have those who are very wealthy. You have the Robert Johnsons, you have the Robert Smiths, and you have these people who are very wealthy, but it's a few, right? It's only a few, really, and we have a lot of work to do. We have a lot of work to do
Yes.
in terms of bringing, they said rising tide brings all ships up.
Mhm.
Well, the
Yes,
tide in our neighborhood has been too low for too long, and we got to raise that tide so that everyone comes up, that we all win.
I
And
agree.
yeah,
I
and I
agree.
think education is one of those components.
You're absolutely right. That is why I'm passionate about the work we do at communities and schools. Clearly, I'm passionate about the wealth gap, but I think education is the great equalizer.
It
But if you
is.
go back to where you talk about a tale of two cities or a tale of two school districts, if you are in a school and the principals are having a hard time hiring teachers because of the reputation of the school or because of the lack of the amenities of that school, imagine there are still students today who are starting out with a substitute. That's unequal. You've got
Mm,
some schools that have PTAs that have $1 million endowments to support their schools. So when you have a teacher who wants to do a project in their classroom, they can write a grant. And you have another school, when a teacher wants to do a project, they either go to one of our community partners who provide school supplies for students, or they go to the dollar store. That is inequitable. That's a tale of two cities. And that
right.
is what we do at communities and schools is we want to level the playing field. So students who go to high poverty schools, students who go to Title I schools, we provide additional supports for them and their families so that they don't get left behind.
Well, we hear that all the time, right? Title I schools. Could you kind of tell the folks who are watching what exactly is a Title I school?
Yeah, so Title I, my work in government kind of gets me familiarized with all these acronyms and all these Title Is. So a Title I school is basically a school that has a self-reported percentage of people in poverty. And so through self-reporting, families say they make a certain amount. And once you hit certain thresholds, that school can get additional monies from the federal government. So once the school hits that threshold of poverty concentration, then they get additional money. And so as time has gone on, Title I classification has really been a way in which communities can determine the degree of poverty. So think about in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, we have 181 schools here. More than half are Title I schools. And so when I say a tale of two cities, if you aren't in a Title I school, by the luck of the draw or by the neighborhood you're able to live in, then you get a different opportunity than someone who's in a Title I school because the barriers are just higher.
And that goes right back to that wealth gap, right? Being able to live where you want to live, and all these types of things. And so, so in your work that you do in the schools, I'm assuming if you're in 56 schools, you're in some Title I schools, you're in other schools. What's the typical duties of a CIS advocate? I guess I don't know what you call it, but I said advocate in that school. What is typically their day like?
I love that question, Tony. So we basically we call them site coordinators. And what that site coordinator does is they first and foremost, they go into the schools and they build a relationship with the student. A lot of times students don't show up in school because they feel like no one cares. No one is there looking out for them. So first and foremost, they're there to say, wait a minute, I didn't see Tony come to school today. I'm going to call him up and see what's going on, right? That's what the site coordinators do. So we have some site coordinators who are masters in social work, and they provide support to our students who have the highest degrees of trauma in their life. You talked about gun violence. There's some of our students who have their peers who perished due to gun violence or a family member, or we have students whose family members have terminal illnesses or they're dealing with homelessness. And so a site coordinator will work with them because when they show up to school, the teacher who's trying to teach arithmetic doesn't really have all of that in the back of their mind and in terms of what's going on with that student. We in communities and schools help remove those barriers. We have some programming for students on the other end of the spectrum who may be the first in their family getting ready to go to college. And going to college, being first in your family to go away to college, there are a lot of rules of engagement that if you don't know, you can get lost in that process. I remember talking to a young man at one of the grocery stores. I would see him and clearly I said, hey, so what are you going to do? You graduated? He told me he graduated and he's looking forward to go to college. So then it was September and October and he was still at the cash register. I said, I thought you were going to college. He said, I didn't know that you had to fill out financial aid forms, right? Mm-hmm. So what we do is we help them fill out financial aid forms. We do the FAFSA. We help them with their college applications, the essays, and all of that, because some of those rules of engagement are passed down from parents or family members. And if you don't have parents or family members who attended college, you may get lost. So we do whatever is needed. One of the key things that we do, there was a young lady who got kicked out of class because she refused to take off her hoodie, right? And the teacher, instead of sending her to the office, the teacher sent her to the site coordinator's office. And so when she went in there and the site coordinator said, so what's going on? Why didn't you take off your hoodie? The student shared that they didn't have enough money in their household this week for her to get her hair done. Right.
Mm.
And so that's a big deal when you're in high school, and y'all know how cruel other students can be.
Yeah.
So what we did is we helped her get her hair supplies. And so it's little things like that that can make a big difference in the life of a student. And so she was able to go back in school. She didn't get disciplined. She didn't get suspended. And those are the small things. We saw a kid who refused to go to class. He loved school, but he refused to go to class. Our team does home visits to say what's going on. So they're knocking on the door and say, why aren't you coming to class? He says, I'm tired of getting picked on because I don't have the right sneakers, right? And so, we were able to get this young man a pair of sneakers. He's back in school studying and really doing what's needed. So being in that school as a trusted confidant, as a friend, our founder says that it's not programs that change students' lives, it's relationships. So we build the relationships and we provide the support, and then we help the students really figure out their potential and really dream big about their life and about their future.
Well, okay. So Michelle and I, we are accounting majors, right? We're numbers people. And as I hear you saying all these things, one of the things that's in the back of my mind is, where's the money coming from to do that? Because all the stuff that you just mentioned, none of it is free, none of it's cheap. So where is there federal funds? Is there grant money? How does community and schools do that, all that?
Yeah, and so your timing could not have been more impeccable. There is a tickler going on the bottom of the screen with our website. Part of the way we get money is people go on that website and they donate to us, right? But no, in all seriousness, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools values what we provide, and they see us as a true partner in this work. They provide us funding. We get generous support from Mecklenburg County government. We have a number of grants, not federal loans, but we did get federal funding due to the pandemic. There was additional funding that were made available. So we have a braided funding source, local, state, federal. But a lot of what we do is there are a number of donors who say, I'm going to give CIS $100. I'm going to give CIS $1,000. And as we get more wealth in our community, that we'll see more zeros behind those donations, hopefully.
Sure.
But it is, the cost for a pair of sneakers is a lot cheaper than the cost to society of a student who gets disengaged in school, who does not complete their education, and they've graduated or they've dropped out of school and they aren't able to really take care of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's so much to that. You know what I mean? It's just like, and some things that, that we're fortunate enough sometimes to not have experienced ourselves, right? But you shed new light on all those things, and what a difference what you're doing makes. And I would think that also, as some of those students who have been impacted by what you do, that they will come back and want to give back to the program, and not just financially, but even just with their time, talent, and treasure, for that matter.
Absolutely right. Some of my staff people were CIS kids. I've got members on my board of directors who are CIS kids. The national president of Communities in School, our national president, is a graduate of Communities in Schools. And so what we realized, I saw a comment from one of the listeners, and I appreciate everyone who tuned in, said something about high-risk students, right? And what we realize is all of our students are phenomenal and resilient, and they just need opportunity and exposure to really unmask their talents, right? Yeah, there it is. Thomas said in DC they call them at-risk students. What we call them here are, geniuses who we want to make sure they don't fall in the gap, fall through the cracks. When I was talking to Tony earlier, I talked about how well positioned Charlotte is. Right, we're the second largest city in the Southeast. Charlotte Mecklenburg Schools is the second largest school district in the entire state of North Carolina. So when you look at those factors, it is not a far stretch of the imagination to think that a future leader, a future senator, a future doctor is sitting in those schools. And if you remember what I said earlier, that half of our schools are high poverty. So while some people say, hey, you saw what happened to that school over there, I say, the next senator is sitting in that school over there. And so our work is to make sure that those schools over there have the resources that are needed so that those students who may not today see themselves as a senator, as a bank president, as an attorney, but we see that potential in them, and our interactions with them to really help them uncover their full potential. I mean, that's what school and life is about. You need opportunities to figure out what your talents are, what your strengths are, because once you unlike what your talents and strengths are, you have such a leg up over so many other people because that's something you're born to do. And we really want to help our students figure out what they were born to do.
The passion, Michelle.
The passion. That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
And parental problem. Now, I hear this term all the time, right? School to prison pipeline. I mean, we hear people say that, and we know that that's an issue. I'd love to get your thoughts on that terminology. And one of the things I love about you already, is that, it's the glass half full, not half empty, right? So it's not the trouble school, but they're geniuses. To get through some of the things that they've gone through and survived and to make it is amazing. It's amazing. So what's your thoughts on the prison to school pipeline that we hear so much about?
Well, we live in a society where things get quantified and tabulated. You throw some equations and some formula into a spreadsheet, and then you can kind of predict behavior, right? And so the school to prison pipeline was derived from a number of years of observation that students who aren't able to read by fourth grade, they're likely to go to prison. And there's a magical thing about fourth grade, because first grade, kindergarten to third grade, you're learning to read. And by fourth grade, you need to read to learn. And so if you aren't able to read to learn by the fourth grade, your likelihood of going to prison is increased. So that whole phrase, school to prison pipeline, is communities around the country began to look at test scores, and they said, oh, we're seeing an increase in people in fourth grade not being able to read. So you know what? We need to build more prisons because that's where they're going to end up, right? And so that's where that whole school to prison pipeline came in. But it was interesting. I was going through my timeline yesterday online, and there was a young man on there. I can't remember where he was from, but he said, back to your point about some of the violence that we see in our communities. He was saying, now, I don't think that the people who were doing these violent acts were listening to, Miles Davis or Beethoven, right? I think they may have been listening to someone say, hey, I'm going to knock you out. I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to kill you, right? So I think there's a part of us having to redefine what culture is, right? When you look at the students that we serve at communities and schools, 90% of them are Black and brown. And I don't think that we need to fall prey to someone's algorithm, but we also need to take responsibility and say, we need to build academic excellence. We need to build studiousness as a part of our cultural expression. And then you know what will happen? There'll be so many empty jail cells out there.
There you
And
go.
so I think part of what happens is we can't fall prey into someone else's narrative about what culture is, what coolness is. And that's part of what we want to do at Communities in Schools is we want to debunk and we want to redefine what it means to be cool. I mean, I go to Panera on, on certain sides of town at about 3 o'clock, and it's full with teenagers in there. They're drinking their tea and they had their notebooks out. They had their little flashcards in there studying.
Yeah.
That needs to be a fixture in our community.
That needs to be the new cool, right? It needs to be the new cool. I know my wife was saying that she was playing when kids were doing their work, and she's an ESL teacher, but she would play classical music while they were doing their work to expose them to, something different. And she's like, they were very productive during that time, and so I think that's great. Now we're coming up on about 15 minutes left on the show, so I'm gonna ask Tchass to take off the CIS hat and tell us how you feel. We've talked a lot about wealth and wealth in our community, and closing the wealth gap. Just give us some of your personal feelings in terms of. And I know I heard you share on the panel and that type of thing. So. I've had the privilege of hearing some of your views, but if you wouldn't mind just sharing a little bit about some of your views on that.
No, I thank you for the opportunity. I'm not sure I could take my CIS hat off, but I'll definitely add my desire to close the wealth gap hat on it, right? And so you shared earlier that I went to Maxwell School of Government. And the reason why I went to Maxwell School of Government, I was very interested in policy. Again, I don't think that our participation in government needs to start and stop with voting and protesting, but we really need to write policies that take our people in mind. And so some people say, well, where did this wealth gap come from? And through my research, I found out that the wealth gap came from bad policy. For instance, 250 years of free labor. A gentleman who wrote the book called The Black Tax, he said that that's worth about $50 trillion. Then in 1867, there was the Homestead Act. And what the Homestead Act did was it gave people in America 160 acres of land at a really steep discount. But guess what? Black people were not able to get any of that land, right? And so the total amount of acreage that was given away at a discount totals 10% of all the land that we have here. And then from 1934 to 1968, we talked about almost 3 decades. Well, for 3 decades, African-American people could not get a mortgage in this country. You look at what happened with Social Security. When Social Security was passed in 1935, they conveniently had the policy say that if you worked in someone's house and cleaned people's houses, or if you worked on farms and in agriculture, guess what? You're not going to get Social Security for that. And so when everyone's heard about redlining, the GI Bill that African Americans and people of color were not able to take advantage of. You could go on and on and on and look at the policies that were put into place to keep us out of wealth. So the wealth gap just didn't appear. It came about from bad policy. And so I wanted to study public policy so we can look at policies that can kind of undo what policies did for us. And so you can't march away bad policy like that. You can't march away or just vote to make those changes, particularly when the elections are getting so close now. We really need to leverage our influence and really have some policies in our back pocket. So I always say, whenever I have an opportunity to meet the next president or the next senator, I'm not worried about a selfie with them on Instagram. I want to share a policy with them that's going to help close the African American wealth gap.
Well, I think that's deep, man, and I appreciate you sharing that. And as you brought out some of those things, like the Social Security, if you're a domestic worker, if you work, sharecropper or whatever the case is, and you're not eligible for those things, I mean, that's a big part of it. And then for most people, right, Michelle, that our homes become a big part of our wealth, right? When we look at what is our net worth, the equity that we have in our homes are a big part of that for most Americans, right? And if we haven't been allowed to own homes, that
for 3 decades, decades, we couldn't get a mortgage.
Yeah. So that puts us way behind. And I know in my family, my wife's grandfather owned Lakeridge that's been passed down through the family. And in order to get that land, he had to have a white guy go and poses him to buy it, to get it. And we have had to deal with those type of things. And what society would like you to believe is this: society would like you to believe the reason why we don't have wealth is because we haven't handled our money right, and we haven't did this, we haven't did that. But as you have just so elegantly talked about, there's a whole laundry list of policies that has created this situation, beginning with slavery itself.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so it's not about being a victim. It's saying, you know what? Someone in a CIS school right now is going to be a policymaker. I want to make sure that they get the supports that they need so that they could go off and really make a difference. I mean, think about how many African-American lobbyists do we have? We don't have lobbyists who are out there really trying to push for these policies. So when you think about what wealth does for us, it gives us a higher degree of participation in society. And when we don't have it, although technically on the books we have certain liberties and freedoms, we can't take advantage of them because we don't have the wealth to do it. And so I really just want to keep saying, being wealthy is not an option. We've got to close that wealth gap in order for us to really fully participate in society. I always think about this. I want my grandkids, when they're studying about historical things, I don't want them to have to put on one of these little masks, one of the little 3D Oculus sets to see it. I want them to be able to get on a plane and go there and see it. That's a whole different kind of report that they'll be able to write versus watching it on YouTube or watching it on an Oculus set. And those are just all the things. You go to the drugstore and you see people standing in line trying to barter, trying to get 1 or 2 pills because they don't have the money to really take care of their health. Wealth is not an option. It's a necessity for us to fully participate. And it's a cushion against bad policy. And it's a cushion against some of the shocks that happen in the system, whether it's COVID, whether it's a government shutdown. I saw some people online from DC. I remember working at social services, and when the government shut down for a couple of weeks, these are people who had really good jobs, who had no cushion, and they were needing to get food donations, right? And so we really have to take things, look at things a lot differently in order for us to make sure that we aren't at zero wealth in 3 decades.
I mean, and we say it all the time. We quote the Wall Street Journal that says 78% of all Americans are living from paycheck to paycheck, not just Black or Latino or brown. All Americans, Michelle, 78% living from paycheck to paycheck. Now, I'm gonna warn you something, Tchass, right here. When you start seeing the rubber band bracelets that says wealth is not an option, I warned you that it was coming. What it made me think of is we took a group of kids from church some years ago to Houston, and we visit, NASA, and they had the bracelets, and I brought a bunch of them. Right, failure's not an option. I love that. Wealth is not an option.
Yeah.
Well,
It's not an
it's
option.
not. It's not. Well, wealth allows you to secure good attorneys. So, but what I will say, Tony, though, is I think some of our challenge too is we have to really admit that we are worth having certain lifestyles, right, and not the lifestyles for an Instagram selfie, but the true lifestyles where we could provide scholarships for students, where we could provide, housing vouchers for folks. I mean, we've got enough wealth in our community where, if we really come together, we could really make sure that we don't fall prey to policies or other systemic inequities that have kept us locked out over the years. We don't ever have to go back to that again.
Right.
True.
And and I know Michelle works with a lot of small business owners, and I work with a lot of individuals, and just understanding what the policies are and how to make things the way they exist today work for you is so important. And someone just talked about, this is very eye-opening information. And so, I appreciate you coming on and sharing. And, from what, I'm hearing, the word is, man, that CIS Charlotte Mecklenburg is leading the country, right? And making a difference, man. Thanks a lot to your leadership and what you're doing. And so that's pretty awesome work.
Well, I'm just really glad to be a part of the affiliate system. We've got a lot of great leaders across the country, and to be a part of a national movement to make sure students don't fall through the crack. Our big vision as an organization is that there'll be a CIS site coordinator in every Title I school across the country, and then it will be in every school across the country. So I'm just trying to do my part here in the Southeast.
And and I love that the next Bill Gates, right? The next the next entrepreneur, the next Robert Smith is sitting in a school room right now. Harvey Jones asked, is CIS in Birmingham, Alabama? I don't know if you would know the answer to that right offhand.
There's one in Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Is there?
Yes.
Okay.
Communities in school. Yes.
Communities in schools. There it is.
Let me check for that, Harvey. I believe we are in Alabama. Let me check though. There's over 100 CIS entities across the country.
And and I think too, do you guys have volunteers that come in and kind of help as well with different programming, or how does that work?
Yeah, no, that's really great. So we're reworking our volunteer opportunities. Since the pandemic, we don't have as many folks coming to the school, but we have volunteers, particularly in our program to support the career and college readiness. We have volunteers who come in, do mock interviews, right? We have volunteers who come and they actually give tours of their place of work. We say, hey, can we bring 20 students to your place of work and shadow you so that they can get a different view of what their career opportunities can be. We have volunteers who help look at essays for college and all those things. So there's plenty of volunteer opportunity. You can reach out on our webpage if you want to get connected. We certainly can use your support.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right, man. It was another good show. A wealth of information, man. I appreciate it. I knew when I first met you, I said, hey, I got to get him on the show because I think what you're doing is so important. And we're blessed to have gone to school, gone to college, and I wasn't first generation, but first generation to graduate. But just understanding the like you said, the financial aid and all that. And Michelle's got more degrees than, Bill Russell got championship rings, right? So she's big on education. Our families are. So we're just fortunate. And if we can but then you think about the next generation and
Mhm.
our kids and our grandkids. Eventually, when you all have them, they'll have a track to run on. It won't be
Yes.
something new. It'll be
It's a
automatic.
standard.
It'll be the standard. It'll
Standard.
be a standard to get
Yeah.
an education.
Yeah.
It won't be this unusual thing
Um,
to be an entrepreneur, right?
yeah.
No, it won't be. It won't be.
In these type of things. So, because
Imagine the top rapper. I'm not going to shout out their name, whether it's a male rapper, a female rapper, or the top basketball, football player. Imagine if they went on their social media page and talked about the book that they're reading, and talked about how much their time they spend studying, and talk about how important it is to save $10 a week. If that would be a game changer.
It would be.
We're so busy, and so once we start building those elements into our culture and get beyond worshiping celebrity, then I think we will be well on our way. And so part of what we want to do at CIS is really help folks see there's more career options for you than just trying to be a celebrity, right?
But the thing is, those celebrities are reading those books. They are. They're just not sharing it on social media.
Yeah.
And why is that?
They couldn't become the business people that they are, staying stuck where they were.
You're talking
right.
about the LeBron James and the Dr. Dre and some of those folks.
They are.
Yeah,
They're
but
not
like
sharing
you said, because of the culture, they don't share that, and
it.
that's part of what we have to change. Is to change that culture where now it's cool to talk about entrepreneurship.
Right.
And it's interesting. I was with Michael B. Roberts, and he was speaking to a group of kids, and he told them, these were college, and he said that you have a better chance of becoming me than you do becoming LeBron James.
Yes.
And
It's
he's
true.
him and his brother together are billionaires. Their properties that they own when combined. I mean, that's huge. And to be able to set that seed in a child's mind, because someone a little while ago had put about the methodology is changing the mindset. And it all begins with mindset, whether we're talking about how to do your budget, talking about your business expansion and leveraging that, turning your passion into profit, or whatever the case may be, dominate your money. It starts with the mindset.
It sure does. And one of the mindsets is GoFundMe is not life insurance. That's a mindset.
You like that one, huh? You like that one. Yeah, GoFundMe is not life insurance. Just having those basic plans in place. And when you're on a panel, you're talking about investing and teaching our kids to invest early on. And all that's important. So, man, it was a great visit, man. Thank you again.
Thank you.
We got to make sure this is not the last time that you come on the show and share.
Sure.
And if there's any projects that we can support you on, we'd love to do it. Hang out in the green room with us. But any last word that you want to say before?
No, I want to say thank you for allowing me to highlight the work that we're doing in communities and schools. I think education is the best investment that a person can make. You invest in yourself, it will pay dividends for generations. And so I thank you for what you're doing to really spread the word in the community about the importance of investing. And I thank you for giving communities and schools an opportunity to share what we do because the next senator, the next bank leader, the next attorney is sitting in one of those schools over there.
That's awesome.
I agree.
That's awesome. So yeah, man, it's great. I got one quick announcement for our folks, and that is that we are starting the next master class. We just finished 7 weeks on the book, and the next master class is coming up, and that is the TRMC University. We'll be talking about financial psychology. We'll begin with financial psychology, and then moving down to savings and budgeting and loans and debt, personal credit, taxes, insurance, and investing will be the 7 weeks that we'll be doing. And it is free, absolutely free of charge. And you can simply register at trmcmasterclass.com, and that's going to be on Monday nights at 8 p.m. We're going to keep it at an hour. Sometimes them questions start rolling in, Michelle. They be keeping me up a little bit late, but looking forward to sharing that information. Again, absolutely free, trmcmasterclass.com. And again, want to give a special thanks to Michelle. Michelle, you are consistent. My girl is here each and every week. She's like, how did Tony rope me into this? What is going on?
How long it's been?
You are going in on 2 years, I believe.
Yes.
I think June will be 2 years. Marlon did the first year with me, and then you've been with me for 2 years. So pretty awesome. So thank you.
You're welcome.
My girl, I can depend on her. My wife said, you ought to get Michelle on the show. Y'all work good together. So here we are.
I know. 2 years later.
2 years later, we still doing it. So, then Tchass, thank you too, man. So everybody have a good night. Thank you for tuning in. Radio show will be 7:30 a.m. if you're here in Charlotte on Praise 100.9. If not, you can catch the podcast everywhere that you listen to your podcast. You're listening to the Real Money Coach Show. Y'all have a good evening.
Good night.
Night.